Then your news must be important. I'll get you a new mount and ride with you myself if you need a guide. It's safe enough for the two of us from here on into the hills? We have patrols running through all these hills. There are a few Kaja bandits left, but nothing more. These Kaja aren't real fighters. Soon they'll all be subject to us, as they should be. Fyodor grinned. And I'd like to go anyway. It will be something to tell my children. Ah, you've a little one? Grekov flushed. Not yet. But you've a woman in mind for a wife, I take it. Fyodor hesitated. A man can't help looking, he said at last. Alexei heard the bitterness in his voice clearly. I'd like to marry, Alexei agreed, feeling suddenly and surprisingly sorry for Grekov, who ought to have had an easy life, being nephew of a tribal war leader and nephew to its headwoman. And since the unnamed young woman in question had no choice in marriage, Alexei could only guess that the obstacles arose from Grekov's elders. But I suppose I never will. Of course, as an orphan, but surely you've standing enough now, since Bakhtian's wife has adopted you into her tent. Adopted me by her customs, not by ours. Or a bit by both, I suppose. Still, you may be right. I hope so. Gods, said Fyodor. There's enough trouble in the world without worrying about women. And that sealed their comradeship. Alexei felt a bit overwhelmed by how easy it was when you had a respectable name, a sister, a place in a tribe. Come on, Fyodor added. We'll get you a new mount and something to eat, and then be on our way. He led Alexei into camp and introduced him round as if he was just another young soldier like himself and the rest of the riders. A short time later, the two young men rode out in charity with each other. By midday, they reached the butte known to the jaran as Kayan Sarmia, her crown fallen from heaven to earth. Once, the story said, this range of hills was known only to the jaran tribes. But in recent generations, a few Kaja settlements had crept out across the plains from settled lands in the south and west to pollute the holy ground where the sun's crown had come to rest on the earth. At the base of the hill, an army waited. Countless soldiers, in their tens and hundreds and thousands, gathered to acclaim the man who would lead them against their ancient enemies. Alexei and Fyodor left their horses with the army and hiked up the trail that ascended the steep hillside. The wind began to buffet them. Soon both were breathing hard, despite their youth, because they were not used to so much hard walking. At last the path leveled and gave out onto a plateau from whose height they could see the shifting mass of the army below, the rolling spread of hills, and a few distant wisps of smoke that marked Kaja villages. Far to the south, past the flat haze of plain, a suggestion of bluer haze marked the southern mountains. To the north and east lay only the vast golden plains that blended at the horizon into the equally monotonous blue of the sky. West, though they could not see it from here, lay the sea. They admired the view for as long as it took to get their breath back. But of far greater interest was the gathering now taking place on the plateau itself. A single tent had been set up at the southern end of the plateau, a great tent whose sides shook in the wind that scoured the summit. Between the northern end, where the two young men stood on an escarpment of rock, and the tent, lay a broad stretch of ground smoothed by generations of wind and storm. On this ground, on the earth itself, some on blankets, some on pillows, sat the assembled commanders and elders of the 1,000 tribes of the jaran. At the very back sat the younger men, commanders of 100 riders each. Many now wore the scarlet shirts, brilliant with embroidery on the sleeves and collar, that had come to be the symbol of the jaran army, though a few still wore the colors of their own tribe. In front of them sat a sea of elders, some ancient and frail, some elderly but robust, female and male both. At the very front sat the etsanas of the 1,000 tribes, each headwoman flanked by the Dayan, the war leader of her tribe. Most of the women were elderly, though a few were young. They wore their finest